Hello friends, I'm Joy Chu, a former scientist turned content creator, and the goal of my YouTube channel is to help home cooks become more confident with science. If you cook a fair amount at home, you've probably asked yourself that inevitable and maybe dreaded question: should I buy a digital scale? And with all the conflicting advice out there, I'm sure many of you are also confused as to when it's best to use a digital scale or measuring cups and spoons. Well, to help you navigate these questions, I wanted to clarify the differences between measuring weight versus volume and lay out some simple guidelines. So here's my first piece of advice. If you make bread, French macaron, or anything that needs to be extremely accurate and precise, you should definitely buy a digital scale. But for those of us who don't make those things, a scale is still extremely useful and highly recommended. The main reason there's this whole debate about using a scale versus measuring cups is an issue of accuracy, that is how close you are to getting the right value, and precision, how close your measurements are relative to each other. When weighing ingredients on a scale, if you want 4 ounces, you can get exactly 4 ounces. And 4 ounces is the same whether I weigh it, or you weigh it, or your very smart cat weighs it, assuming we're all at sea level. And it's the same today and tomorrow and most likely forever. In other words, a scale easily helps you be accurate and precise. However, if you take your measuring cup and try to scoop out your ingredient, the amount you scoop can be way off from what you actually want and totally different between now and even the next minute. Let me show you to illustrate what I mean. So I'm going to take this 2/3 cup, scoop some flour, and then weigh each amount in this bowl 10 different times. 2/3 of a cup of flour weighs 3.33 ounces. So we'll look at how close I am to that number and look at the relative differences between each measurement I take. To help you visualize the measurements I just made, I've created a simple bar graph. Each bar represents one measurement, and the dotted line is the expected weight, 3.33 ounces. Only 2 measurements closely match the expected weight, and even after 10 times, the numbers changed quite a bit from measurement to measurement. The lowest weight was 3.3, and the highest was 3.9, which means the scoops were actually between 2/3 and 3/4 of a cup of flour. Okay, now that we've gone over the digital scale, let's talk about measuring cups and spoons. So here's the thing. We've just seen that volumetric measurements aren't as reliable as weight measurements, but I'm pretty sure that most home cooks, including myself, already use volume a lot for our cooking and baking. So instead of saying that we should never use volume, I think it's much more useful to learn how to do it as accurately and precisely as possible, which goes into my second piece of advice. Make sure that you have a set of measuring cups for dry ingredients and a separate liquid measuring cup. So why does this difference matter? Measuring cups for dry ingredients are designed so that you can scoop and then easily level off the excess, whereas it's basically impossible to do that with liquid measuring cups. And if you measure liquids in dry measuring cups, the surface tension of the liquid can lead to highly variable amounts. Let's see what happens if we interchange the 2 types of measuring cups. This experiment is based on the one from Cooks Illustrated, and here's how it works. First, I'm going to scoop 2/3 of a cup of flour with a dry measuring cup 10 different times and take measurements on my scale. I'll do the same thing again, except with a liquid measuring cup. For the second set of measurements, I'll pour 2/3 of a cup of water into a dry measuring cup and weigh each amount. Then I'll repeat the measurements with a liquid measuring cup. So what I'm showing you here is the averages of both the dry and liquid measuring cup weights. The dotted line is our standard 3.33 ounces. The dry measuring cup average was slightly more accurate, but the difference between the two becomes more obvious when we look at something called standard deviation. An easy way to think about standard deviation is to go back to our bullseye picture and see how spread out the x's are. Larger standard deviation means more spread out and less precise, while smaller standard deviation means less spread out and more precise. So how does this apply to our flour measurements? Let's look at the numbers for each measurement. Using the dry measuring cup had a smaller standard deviation, which is good in this experiment since that means more precise. Now for the water measurements, we get the opposite result. I'm showing you averages for the dry and liquid measuring cup weights, with the dotted line at 5.56 ounces as our expected weight. On average, the liquid measuring cup was more accurate, and looking at the standard deviation, we see that using the liquid measuring cup was also more precise. So the point of this experiment is to show that if you choose to use measuring cups, use the right ones to minimize errors. Also, for the best results, level off the ingredients in your dry measuring cups with the back of a knife. For wider liquid measuring cups like mine, I've found that pouring the liquid on a flat surface and getting the marker to reach the middle, not top or bottom, of the meniscus achieves the greatest accuracy. Two related side notes. First, some of you might be wondering about sticky or viscous ingredients like honey, nut butters, or mayonnaise. It's okay to use your dry measuring cups for those. Second, when measuring liquids, note that a fluid ounce is not the same as an ounce. Fluid ounce is a measurement of volume, whereas an ounce is a measurement of weight. Your liquid measuring cup is in fluid ounces, which is another reason to use it for your liquids. Alright, now for the last piece of advice, I want to talk about measuring spoons and tinier amounts of ingredients. So what should you do if you want to measure a tablespoon or less? This is where you should actually use your measuring spoons and not a digital scale. The reason is that the average home kitchen scale isn't sensitive enough to accurately measure the extreme ends of its measurement range. So, for example, my scale can technically measure 0 to 11 pounds. If I tried to weigh half an ounce on this scale, the machine might say 0.5 ounces, but in actuality, I could be putting in way less or way more than indicated. So if you're trying to measure smaller amounts of ingredients like half a teaspoon of salt or 1 teaspoon of sugar, you're likely to be more accurate and precise if you use your measuring spoons. Also, the distinction between dry and liquid isn't important here, so you can use your measuring spoons for both. And that's it! I hope this video helps you understand all the different ways to measure your ingredients and why. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to the channel below. I've also linked a few resources I found helpful in the description, so feel free to check those out. Have a fantastic start to the new year, and I'll see you soon.
Happy New Year!